Close your eyes and drift back to 1998. You're sitting cross-legged on the floor, the glow of your Game Boy screen washing over your face in the dimming evening light. Your thumbs work the directional pad with practiced ease, guiding your character through the pixelated world of Kanto. You've collected badges, caught creatures in tall grass, and defeated countless trainers. But there's something you haven't noticed yet, something hiding in plain sight within the code and design of Pokémon Red and Blue. Something dark that transforms your childhood rival from a simple antagonist into a figure of genuine tragedy. The theory we're exploring tonight isn't new, but it endures because it changes everything about how you see these games. It suggests that somewhere between Vermilion City and Lavender Town, your rival's Raticate didn't just disappear from his team, it died, and you were responsible. Let's start at the beginning, back when Pokémon Red and Blue first launched in North America in September of 1998. These games introduced millions of children to the concept of catching, training, and battling pocket monsters. The core loop was simple but addictive. Capture creatures, level them up, defeat gym leaders, and eventually challenge the Elite Four. But woven into this straightforward progression was a recurring character who served as your mirror image, a rival who pushed you to improve, who always seemed one step ahead or one step behind depending on your choices. This rival, officially named Blue in the game's code but often called Gary by fans due to the anime adaptation, receives his first Pokemon from Professor Oak at the same time you do. He chooses the starter that has a type advantage over yours, ensuring that your early battles against him carry an extra layer of challenge. Throughout your journey across Kanto, he appears at key moments, blocking your path or surprising you just when you think you've made progress. His team evolves and grows just as yours does, creating the sense that you're both on parallel journeys through this world. One of these encounters occurs aboard the SS Anne, a luxury cruise liner docked in Vermilion City. By the time you board the ship, you've already defeated several gym leaders and your Pokemon have grown considerably stronger. The SS Anne is packed with trainers eager to battle, from sailors with water types to gentlemen with diverse teams. The ship itself becomes a gauntlet of battles, testing your preparation and your ability to manage resources. Pokémon centers don't exist on the ship, though there is a bed where you can rest if you explore thoroughly enough. The atmosphere is one of crowded hallways, narrow passages, and the constant threat of another trainer spotting you and initiating combat. Your rival waits for you on the upper deck near the captain's quarters. He's been training too, and his team reflects that growth. His Pokemon have evolved since your last encounter, with his Raticate now at level 16, accompanied by a Kadabra at level 18, a Pidgeotto at level 19, and his starter Pokemon at level 20. The battle itself follows the familiar rhythm of Pokemon combat. Turn-based commands, type advantages, the satisfaction of watching your carefully trained team overcome his. The Raticate in particular can be a nuisance due to its Hyper Fang attack, a normal type move with solid power that can chip away at your team's health if you're not careful. When you defeat him, there's no special cutscene, no indication that anything unusual has occurred. Your rival makes a comment about how strong you've become, perhaps with his characteristic smugness still intact. You proceed to the captain's quarters, receive the cut that allows you to progress in your journey, and disembark from the ship. The SS Anne sails away, never to return to Vermilion Harbor. The game moves forward, and so do you. But something has changed, something you won't notice until much later. The path from Vermilion City to Lavender Town takes you through several routes and challenges. You might venture through Diglett's Cave, a shortcut that bypasses some areas, but offers its own encounters with the ground-type Pokemon that give the tunnel its name. You navigate Route 9 and Route 10, battling hikers and picnickers along the way. Then comes Rock Tunnel, a dark cave where you need the Flash HM to see clearly, though many players push through in darkness to avoid wasting a move slot on a Pokemon. The tunnel is filled with trainers and wild encounters, a true test of endurance. When you finally emerge from Rock Tunnel's eastern exit, you find yourself on the outskirts of Lavender Town. Even before you enter, something feels different. The music changes to a haunting melody, composed with unusual scales and frequencies, a tune that has become infamous in gaming culture for its unsettling quality. The town's theme uses many sharp, atonal notes, creating an eerie atmosphere that distinguished it from every other location in the game. This wasn't just background music. It was storytelling through sound, preparing you for what you'd find here. Lavender Town's Pokémon Tower is a 7-floor graveyard that holds hundreds of graves for deceased Pokémon. This alone was revolutionary for a children's game in the late 90s. Up until this point, Pokémon fainted in battle, then were healed at Pokémon centers. The concept of permanent death wasn't part of the gameplay experience, but Lavender Town forced players to confront the reality that in this world, Pokémon could and did die. The tower was filled with mourners, people crying over lost companions, channelers communing with spirits. The atmosphere was thick with grief. As you ascend the tower's stairs, you encounter your rival on the second floor. And this is where everything changes. Your rival greets you with a question. "Hey, what brings you here? Your Pokémon don't look dead." The phrasing stands out immediately. He asks what brings you to this place, a tower dedicated to deceased Pokémon. He observes that your Pokémon don't look dead, making an explicit connection between this location and death. The game's script from this encounter has been preserved and analyzed by fans for decades, and these exact words have become central to the theory we're exploring tonight. But when the battle begins, something is immediately apparent to anyone paying attention. Raticate is no longer on his team. Where the SS Anne encounter featured Raticate prominently, this team has replaced it entirely. The composition varies depending on which starter you chose. If you picked Bulbasaur, his team now consists of Kadabra at level 20, Gyarados at level 22, Exeggcute at level 23, Pidgeotto at level 25, and Charmeleon at level 25. If you chose Charmander, he has Kadabra at level 20, Growlithe at level 22, Exeggcute at level 23, Pidgeotto at level 25, and Wartortle at level 25. If you selected Squirtle, his lineup includes Kadabra at level 20, Gyarados at level 22, Growlithe at level 23, Pidgeotto at level 25, and Ivysaur at level 25. Notice that every Pokemon from the SS Anne battle appears here except for one. Pidgeotto has grown stronger. Kadabra remains on the team. His starter has evolved further or gained levels, but Raticate, which was level 16 on the ship, has vanished without explanation. This isn't how rival battles typically work in Pokemon games. Throughout your journey, rival teams remain relatively consistent, with Pokemon evolving and growing stronger but rarely disappearing entirely. The game's design establishes patterns that players come to expect. Your rival has a core team that represents his journey, just as you have yours. When a Pokemon suddenly drops from that lineup without narrative explanation, it creates a gap that players instinctively notice, even if they don't immediately understand its significance. The environmental storytelling compounds this observation. You're not encountering your rival in some random route or gym. You're meeting him in a cemetery for Pokemon, a location specifically designated as a place of mourning and death. The game has established this context carefully. The first floor features mourners saying things like, "I came to pray for my Clefairy, Sniff, I can't stop crying," and "My Growlithe, why did you die?" Every element of Lavender Town reinforces the theme of loss. After you defeat your rival at the Pokémon Tower, his dialogue offers another clue. According to the game's preserved script, he says, "How's your Pokédex coming, pal? I just caught a Cubone. I can't find the grown-up Marowak yet. I doubt there are any left. Well, I better get going. I've got a lot to accomplish, pal. Smell you later." He mentions catching a Cubone and looking for Marowak, providing a surface-level explanation for his presence in the tower. He's here to catch ghost-type Pokemon to fill out his Pokédex. It's a perfectly reasonable motivation that deflects from any darker interpretation. But let's consider the timeline and logistics. The SS Anne battle occurs in a crowded, chaotic environment aboard a luxury liner packed with trainers. Fans of this theory propose that the rival was unable to reach a Pokemon Center in time to save his Raticate after the severe injuries it sustained in battle. The ship is about to depart, creating urgency. After your battle, you proceed to the captain's quarters, receive cut, and disembark. The SS Anne then sails away permanently, never returning to Vermilion Harbor. Think about what this scenario might mean from a narrative perspective. Your rival's Raticate took damage in your battle. In the game mechanics, damage is represented by hit points dropping until a Pokemon faints. But if we consider the world of the story rather than just the gameplay systems, what if that damage was more critical than usual? What if Raticate's injuries required immediate medical treatment, the kind only available at a Pokemon Center? And what if the chaos and confusion of a departing cruise ship, the crowds of trainers and sailors, the narrow passages and the urgency of disembarking prevented your rival from getting his Pokemon the help it needed in time? The theory suggests that somewhere between the SS Anne and Lavender Town, Raticate succumbed to its injuries. Your rival, confronted with the death of a Pokemon he'd trained since the early roots of Kanto, had to process grief and guilt that would fundamentally change him. He couldn't blame you directly because Pokemon battles are an accepted part of this world's culture. Trainers battle constantly and Pokemon faint regularly, but the circumstances, the timing, the chaos of the situation might have created a perfect storm where medical attention came too late. This interpretation transforms your rival's behavior at the Pokemon Tower. Based on the evidence presented by the setting and the missing Raticate, fans of this theory read his presence there as more than just Pokédex completion. He might be there to mourn. His opening question about whether your Pokemon looked dead could be projection, his own fears and grief manifesting as confrontation. The fact that he immediately transitions to talking about his Pokédex progress and catching Cubone might be avoidance, refusing to acknowledge the real reason he's in this place of death and remembrance. Fans who embrace this theory point out that despite this potential loss, the rival never outwardly tells you that you're responsible, instead hiding any grief and channeling his energy into his quest to become Indigo League champion. Throughout the rest of the game, he continues to appear, continues to challenge you, continues to act with his characteristic confidence. For those who believe the theory, though, there's a subtext now, an underlying current of loss that colors every subsequent encounter. Consider the larger narrative arc that this theory creates. Your rival trains with the goal of defeating you and eventually making it to the Pokemon League. When you reach the Indigo Plateau at the game's climax and battle through the Elite Four, you discover that your rival has beaten you there, claiming the champion title just before your arrival. It's a shocking moment, a twist that forces you to face him as the final challenge. He's achieved his goal, reached the pinnacle of Pokemon training, but the victory is short-lived because it lasts only minutes before you defeat him and claim the title for yourself. If we accept the theory that Raticate died, this victory might have represented something more, perhaps an attempt to honor his fallen Pokemon's memory with lasting achievement. In the end, your rival is scolded by his grandfather, Professor Oak, while you receive the professor's praise. This final scene adds another layer to the character's arc. His grandfather, the person who gave him his first Pokemon and started him on this journey, focuses his attention and approval on you instead. For those who read the story through the lens of Raticate's death, this becomes one more loss in a series of losses that define the rival's journey. Of course, not everyone accepts this theory. There are alternative explanations that don't require the death of Raticate. The most common counter-argument is that the rival simply deposited Raticate in a PC box to make room for new Pokemon. This is something players do constantly throughout their journey. As you progress through the game and catch more Pokemon, you rotate team members, storing some while training others. It would make perfect sense for your rival to do the same, especially since he mentions wanting to catch Cubone at the Pokemon Tower. Pokemon storage through Bill's PC system is an established game mechanic, and there's no indication in the game's code or dialogue that Blue doesn't have access to it. Furthermore, from a competitive standpoint, Raticate has never been considered particularly strong. Replacing it with more powerful options like Gyarados, Exegcute, or Growlithe would be a strategic decision that any serious trainer focused on becoming champion might make. Your rival is supposed to be a skilled trainer, someone who understands type advantages and team composition. Keeping Raticate when demonstrably better options become available would actually be out of character for someone so focused on strength. The dialogue itself doesn't definitively confirm death. When your rival asks what brings you to the tower and mentions that your Pokemon don't look dead, skeptics of the theory point out that he's not being mournful or sad but rather displaying his usual competitive attitude. The reference to death could simply be acknowledging the tower's purpose as a graveyard, not indicating personal loss. His statement that he's trying to catch Cubone and Marowak provides a concrete, practical reason for his presence that doesn't require any tragic backstory. After all, Cubone can be caught in the Pokémon Tower, making his explanation entirely plausible. Additionally, there is no explicit confirmation in the game's text that connects Raticate's absence to death. Battles in Pokémon games are depicted as causing Pokémon to faint, not die, when they lose all their hit points. Pokémon centers heal them instantly and completely. The separation between gameplay mechanics and narrative storytelling means we shouldn't automatically assume that battle damage carries lethal consequences outside of specific story moments like Cubone's mother, the Marowak that was killed by Team Rocket and whose ghost haunts the tower. Yet despite these logical counter-arguments, the theory persists because it adds emotional depth to a character who otherwise exists mainly as an obstacle. The ambiguity appears intentional, leaving room for interpretation. Game developers, especially in the 1990s, often relied on environmental storytelling and player inference to create narrative depth within the technical limitations of their hardware. The Game Boy couldn't render elaborate cutscenes or voice-acted dialogue. Every detail had to work harder, carrying multiple potential layers of meaning. Lavender Town features prominently in Pokémon's cultural legacy precisely because it introduced the concept of Pokémon mortality, making it one of the few areas in the games where death is explicitly addressed. The entire location is designed to make players uncomfortable, to confront them with loss in a way that contrasts sharply with the rest of the game's tone. In this context, having your rival's Raticate disappear at exactly this location with no explanation beyond a casual mention of Pokédex completion strikes many fans as deliberate narrative construction rather than random team rotation. The theory has gained such traction over the decades because it reframes the entire rivalry. Instead of a simple story about two trainers competing to be the best, it becomes a story about the potential hidden costs of that competition. For those who embrace this reading, it suggests that your victories might have consequences you never intended. It makes your rival more sympathetic rather than just antagonistic. It adds weight to the journey and complexity to the world that might otherwise seem straightforward. Players who embrace this interpretation often cite the emotional resonance it creates. Looking back at the game with this lens changes how you see every encounter with your rival. His early confidence becomes youthful bravado, not yet tempered by loss. His behavior at the Pokémon Tower, in this reading, becomes grief poorly masked. His determination to become champion takes on new meaning, potentially driven by something deeper than simple ambition. And his defeat at your hands in the final battle becomes more poignant because he came so close to achieving something significant, only to fall short once again. The beauty of this theory is that it can't be definitively proven or disproven. The game leaves just enough ambiguity for both readings to coexist. Players who want a straightforward adventure story can see your rival as simply optimizing his team for better coverage. Players who prefer narrative complexity can see the death of Raticate as a turning point that reshapes the entire character arc. Both interpretations are supported by the evidence on screen. This ambiguity reflects a sophisticated understanding of storytelling. The best narratives often leave room for interpretation, allowing different players to construct different meanings from the same events. By not explicitly confirming Raticate's fate, Game Freak created space for player imagination and emotional investment. The theory has sparked countless discussions, fanworks, and re-examinations of Pokémon Red and Blue's narrative design. It has become part of the game's legacy, a piece of folklore passed between players and generations. Whether you believe Raticate died or simply got boxed for a better Pokémon ultimately depends on how you prefer to engage with the game's world. Do you see it as a purely mechanical experience where team optimization is just part of progression? Or do you see it as a narrative space where actions have consequences and characters experience genuine growth and loss? Both approaches are valid. Both enrich the experience in different ways. As you drift towards sleep tonight, consider what you choose to believe. Imagine your rival standing in that cemetery tower, surrounded by graves, challenging you to battle one more time. Imagine what he's thinking, what he's feeling, what he's lost. Imagine how the rest of the story changes when filtered through that lens of grief and determination. The game becomes richer, more textured, more human. The theory endures not because it's definitively true, but because it adds emotional stakes to a game that many of us played as children. It suggests that even in a world of pixel art and chiptune music, real feelings and real loss could exist. It reminds us that the stories we tell ourselves about these games are as much a part of their legacy as the code on the cartridge. So the next time you boot up Pokémon Red or Blue, pay attention when you reach Lavender Town. Listen to that unsettling music. Climb the stairs of Pokémon Tower. Face your rival in that place of mourning and memory. And ask yourself what really happened to his Raticate. Before we end, if you enjoyed this deep dive into Pokémon lore and want more content exploring the hidden stories and forgotten details of gaming history, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. These theories and mysteries are what keep classic games alive in our memories.